Great. I think it's very important because this is a very important conversation because one of the things we're talking about is how do we get here? I saw a poll, and many people probably saw it several months back, where they said, of which Americans are willing to continue to support Ukraine despite the possibility of a nuclear war. And there was an alarmingly high number. That was, how many Democrats, how many Republicans, et cetera, that said yes. And the question becomes, there's one thing when you say you're sleepwalking into nuclear war, you're sleepwalking into disaster. The other thing that I think is more applicable here is people who are assertively running towards disaster, who are assertively saying, let's go do this. We all got to join together. And how does that happen? So the term that I've been using is the weaponization of rage. And I'll give you a couple of instances. Number one, and the last one will be the Ukrainian extremists. Number one, that is, in order to get regular working class people, the working class, the poor, the working poor, et cetera, to go along with the wants of the rich and powerful, they have to convince them that their interests are aligned. We have the same interest, we have the same enemies, we have the same needs, things of that nature. And one of the ways they do that is, and here's an example, you weaponize rage. You create either you go find a place where there is existing anger and rage, or if it's not already there, you create it. An example of creating it would be the demonization of leaders of a country. Syria, there's nobody there, that's not a country, there's a person named Assad. Venezuela, there's a person named Maduro. Libya, there's a person named Gaddafi. You never say the word Russia. You always say Putin's doing this, Putin, Saddam Hussein. And so you demonize this person. You make this person a very evil, demonic figure. And you say, basically, and you create an environment where you see any good person, we're all on the side of good, of course, any good person would unite against this evil figure. So we've all joined in this wonderful battle to battle evil. Our interests align. We're all angry and rageful. This person used weapons of mass destruction on his own people. He did all these terrible things. You create an anger towards that person, a rage towards that person, a resentment. And of course, the accompanying emotion with anger is fear, right? So you hate this person, but you fear him at the same time. And so once you create that, you get the alignment, because now the wealthy, the oligarchs, the powerful say, well, I hate Assad. Don't you hate Assad? I hate Putin. Don't you hate Putin? They're terrible. And together, this person must be stopped or thwarted in their evil machinations, no matter what. And now you can drag people. You can take that rage and anger that you have created against this evil other person, and you can now get people to think in ways, act in ways, and take chances that they would never normally take, because they now believe that they are part of like this gigantic crusade for good that must stop this evil person. So one option is create the rage against the target and then utilize that rage as a weapon. Another one, which we all know very familiar with, whether it kind of works like this. Why does the US always seem to unite with these extremist organizations? You've got the Mujahideen Akhalq, the MEK, who I think they're in Albania. They have a compound, but if you look into them, they're the Iranians hate them. Hate the actual Iranian people hate them. They consider them traitors. They've been parts of violent terrorist attacks on Iran. Kind of a really weird quasi-religious kind of cult that the U.S. fuels. But what is about it? They are angry and rageful at the Iranian leadership. So the U.S. comes in and says, hey, you hate the Iranian leadership, don't you? Yes, we do. You're furious and angry at them, aren't you? Yes, we are. Funny thing, so are we. I think we need to join. Our interests align. Why don't we help you and work together to take out these evil people that you hate so much? Now, go to Ukraine. And what do you have? They go there and they're like, well, what do we have? We've got some Nazis. They go to the Nazis. You guys hate Russians. Oh my gosh, nobody hates Russians worse than us. We despise them. Yeah, funny thing, we kind of feel the same way. Our interests align. What do you know? I got an idea. Why don't we help you? We'll work together to smite those evil Russians. So what do you have? You come into an environment where there's extremists that are rage-filled. They hate the Russians or whoever the target is, in this instance, the Russians. You come in, and that rage is the weapon that you use. You use it against your adversaries, right? But you also use it against your, and I use this word in air quotes, allies. So the Nazis, the fascists are your ostensible allies. You use that to convince them, look, we need you to throw all of your military-aged men out in front of the Russian artillery and get them wiped out. We just want to, aggravate Russia for a while by continually throwing your bodies at them, by destroying your, by turning your country into a heap of trash. But we got to get you to go along with it. We can utilize your rage and stoke the rage and help. One of the things that happened after 2014, after the U.S. overthrew the government and this is interesting, a lot of people, when they talk about Nazis in Ukraine, right? Yeah, they were already there. There's a few of them. However, after the U.S. took control of the government, one of the things they did was they elevated their power. They increased their power. These fascist militias weren't actually formally part of the Ukrainian military until after the U.S. came to power. After the U.S. came to power, the U.S. then made them formally and officially part of the Ukrainian military and elevated them in many ways. They kind of almost made them iconic to the defense of Ukraine. They fed into that nationalism. They made heroes, right? Villains and heroes. They made heroes of them. They armed them. And then they used that hatred and anger and rage to basically make the entire country suicidal. Now, let me add this. They're doing the same thing to Poland, Slovakia, etc. They're going to these Baltic states that basically hate Russians, and they're saying, you hate Russians, right? You've got this rage at Russians. Yes, we do. We hate them. Perfect. So do we. It's the weaponization of rage. But when rage is weaponized, it's not just weaponized against the adversary, against the target. It's also weaponized against the erstwhile, the ostensible allies, because you have to convince people to take actions that are detrimental to their own health, to their own well-being, to their families, to everything, to throw it all away because they believe that you're aligned with them. Let me add one more thing. It works best when you have a weak ally, when you can create a David and Goliath scenario. So you come into your ally and you say, you guys want to fight the Russians, right? Yes, but you're very, very weak and you're not able to fight the Russians, are you? No, but we'd love to. We're extremely powerful. You can tap into our power, and now you can be extremely powerful. And you also kind of convince them that when they get in a lot of trouble, you'll be there to back them and help them, which you will. So you weaponize the rage and you use that against your allies to get them to take actions that are not in their best interest, and you use that rage of theirs to attack your enemy. So they're just tools. And I would even go further to say they're doing it to the entire Europe. If you look at Europe, there has been an underlying, still kind of, I'd call it a racism type thing against Slavic people in Western Europe. And they can go to the people and say, look, the Russians aren't as good as us. They're, a lower species, etc. And there's still some of that, let's be honest, in Europe. And you can use that to say, well, the Russians are a bunch of barbarians and they have to be dealt with. You're going to have to make some, and what does it come again? You've got to make some sacrifices, big sacrifices, but you're part of a gigantic alliance that's going against the people that you hate, the people that you're angry against, and feed the rage, because the rage is the weapon that allows you to A, use these proxies against your adversaries, and B, one second here, and B, to get your adversaries to put their own interests aside, believe that your interests are aligned with those, and then turn themselves into basically suicide bombers. I think that's what's going on in Europe. But keep in mind, that's what happens to the American people. It's pertinent to this conversation because it's one of the ways that the American people get convinced, do you hate Putin or Russia? Because it's the same thing starting to really leak in with China. Do you hate this other adversary? It is reckless, as we're all discussing, to put all humans on Earth in jeopardy for some neocon fantasy of eternal hegemony, but you give the people a cover story. No, certainly it's not that. It's because we're all together. We have to do good against this evil person out there. And then you just continue to feed them, whether it's Russiagate or whatever. You continually feed them more reasons to hate this adversary. And then when someone says to them, hey, you're risking nuclear war and human annihilation. Yes, but I am united with a group that is fighting evil. It's so important. It doesn't matter what could possibly happen. It doesn't matter what we put at risk because we've joined together to fight evil. And I think it's important to have that discussion, to understand that, because you have to get into that loop where people understand that they're being misled, and where you can get people aware that this anger and rage that they have is being created artificially, and then it's being used as a weapon against them and their adversary. I found that when you talk to people about this, which I do on radio, about this phenomenon, callers will call in and they'll kind of shake their head and say, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I can't see them shaking their head on the radio, but you get my point. All right, thanks a lot. That's my presentation as such as it is.